Hello, everyone. I'm Alex, and welcome back to our English Learning Podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that often sparks laughter, confusion, and even some healthy debates. What's the difference between American and British English? If you've ever watched a Hollywood movie and then tuned into a British drama series, you've probably noticed that both are speaking English, yet somehow they feel different. Different words, different pronunciations, even different spellings. That's because although American and British English share the same roots, they've evolved in their own unique ways due to history, culture, and regional influences. It's like English went on two different road trips and came back with different souvenirs. Let's start with something fun, the accent. If you close your eyes and listen to someone from New York and someone from London, you'll immediately pick up on their different musicality and rhythm. The British accent, especially the so-called received pronunciation, or RP, often sounds more clipped and formal. Think of how someone might say can't. In British English, it's pronounced with a longer A sound, like can't, while in American English, it sounds more like can't. But remember, Britain isn't just one accent. There's Cockney, Scouse, Scottish, Welsh, Yorkshire, and so on. Similarly, the U.S. has regional accents too. Southern drawls, Boston's distinctive speech, California chill vibes, and even the strong nasal twang of Chicago. So, if you're mimicking a British accent, are you going for London or Liverpool? That makes a huge difference. Now, pronunciation aside, let's talk about spelling differences. American English tends to be more simplified. For example, Americans write color without a U, while the British write color. Americans say organize with a Z, while Brits say organize with an S. The same goes for words like realize, US, versus realize, UK, and defense, US, versus defense, UK. This difference dates back to Noah Webster, the famous American lexicographer, who believed American English should be simplified and more logical. So, yes, you can thank Webster for dropping the extra letters, or blame him, depending on your perspective. Another fascinating area is grammar and usage. While most structures are the same, some differences exist in prepositions, collective nouns, and verb tenses. For instance, a Brit might say, "I've just eaten," using the present perfect tense, while an American would likely say, "I just ate," which leans toward the simple past. Both are correct, but the choice reflects cultural preferences. Also, British people often treat collective nouns as plural. The team are winning. Americans usually treat them as singular. The team is winning. And when it comes to prepositions, Americans would say on the weekend, while Brits say at the weekend. These small details can trip up learners, but they also add color to the language. To wrap up this first segment, remember, neither version is more correct. They're just different flavors of the same dish. Whether you speak with a twang or a posh tone, English remains the bridge that connects people across the world. And don't worry if you mix them up. Even native speakers do that sometimes. In the next segment, we'll have some fun with vocabulary. You'll be surprised at how a single word can mean completely different things on each side of the pond. Now that we've warmed up with accents and grammar, let's dive into the heart of the American versus British English puzzle, vocabulary differences. This is where the fun really begins. You might think you know English until you find out that what you call pants in the US means something totally different in the UK. So grab your notebook, or should I say your notepad, and let's explore the hilarious and sometimes confusing world of word differences. Let's start with food, because let's face it, that's where a lot of confusion happens. In America, people eat fries with burgers, but in Britain, those are chips. Meanwhile, what Americans call chips, the crunchy snack, are called crisps in the UK. Got that? Fries equals chips, and chips equals crisps. But wait, there's more. A biscuit in Britain is what Americans call a cookie, while a biscuit in America is a soft bread roll, often eaten with gravy. Imagine a British person ordering biscuits and gravy in the US, expecting something sweet and getting a salty surprise instead. Next, clothing. In the US, you wear pants on your legs, but in the UK, pants usually mean underwear. So if you tell a Brit, "I like your pants," be prepared for some awkward stares. What Americans call suspenders, Brits call braces. A jumper in the UK is a sweater in the US, and what Americans call a vest, Brits call a waistcoat. Confusing? Just imagine shopping in both countries. Transportation is another area where the two versions split. In the UK, people drive on motorways and park in the car park, while in the US, it's highways and parking lots. British cars have bonnets and boots, while American cars have hoods and trunks. If a Brit says they need petrol, they mean they're heading to the gas station. And when they say they're getting the lift, they're probably hopping into an elevator. These little word swaps can turn a normal conversation into a guessing game. Let's also look at school-related words. In the UK, students go to primary school and secondary school, while in the US, it's elementary school, middle school, and high school. British students might go to university, while Americans go to college. Oh, and in the US, the principal runs the school, while in the UK, it's the head teacher. Even the grading systems differ. Americans use A through BEF, while Brits may use numbers or letter grades in a slightly different way. The differences aren't limited to nouns. Sometimes whole expressions change. Americans might say, "I'm going to take out the trash," while a Brit would say, "I'll put the rubbish in the bin." Americans are mad when they're angry, but in the UK, mad can also mean crazy. So if someone says, "You're mad," check the context. Are they angry or just calling you eccentric? There are hundreds of these vocabulary differences, and while it might seem overwhelming, it's actually quite fun. It's like having two dictionaries for the same language. For English learners, this can be tricky. Do you follow American English or British English? My advice? Choose the one most relevant to your goals. If you plan to travel to the US, stick with American English. If you're heading to the UK, go British. But it's always good to understand both, especially if you watch international shows or work with global teams. In our next segment, we'll explore the cultural context behind these differences, why these variations exist, and how history, media, and national identity have shaped the way people speak. Stay tuned.
And we've already had a great time exploring pronunciation, vocabulary, and some quirky examples of American versus British English. But you may be wondering, how did we even end up with two versions of the same language? Why did English take such different turns in the UK and the US? That's exactly what we're going to dig into in this segment, the history, culture, and identity behind the split. Trust me, understanding the why will make the what so much more memorable. Let's go back in time. When British settlers sailed across the Atlantic and arrived in what we now call the United States, they brought their language with them, early modern English. But once English was planted in American soil, it began to evolve. New people, new places, and new cultural influences started changing how people spoke. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the language continued to evolve in its own way. Think of it like two siblings growing up in different cities. They still have the same roots, but their environment changes their style, habits, and preferences. In the early days of America, there was a strong push to create a unique identity, something different from the British monarchy. This included changes to how people wrote and spoke. One man in particular played a big role in shaping American English, Noah Webster. You may have heard his name from dictionaries. Webster wanted to make American English easier, more logical, and more distinct. So he took out what he saw as unnecessary letters, like the U in color, honor, and favor. He swapped S for Z in words like realize and organize. These weren't just spelling tweaks, they were part of a bigger cultural shift to show the world that the US was its own place, with its own voice. At the same time, British English was undergoing its own transformations. The Industrial Revolution, the rise of the British Empire, and urbanization led to the development of regional accents, local dialects, and class-based variations in language. In fact, many of the so-called proper British forms you hear today, like have you got or shall we, weren't necessarily considered upper class centuries ago. Language, like fashion, evolves with time. Now let's talk about media and pop culture, because these days they play a huge role in how English is learned and spread. Thanks to the global popularity of American music, Hollywood films, and Netflix series, many learners are first exposed to American English. Phrases like gonna, wanna, awesome, and you guys come naturally to those watching US content. Meanwhile, fans of British dramas, BBC shows, and Harry Potter movies might find themselves picking up phrases like brilliant, cheers, or bloody hell. Interestingly, the influence flows both ways. British English has absorbed Americanisms over time, and vice versa. For example, younger British speakers might say trash instead of rubbish, or movies instead of films, because they've grown up with American media. Likewise, Americans may sometimes use British phrases like I fancy a cup of tea or knackered just because they enjoy the charm of British slang. This mix creates a beautiful overlap, and in many global cities today, people speak a blend of both Englishes without even realizing it. But here's something deeper to think about. Language reflects identity. When someone speaks British English, it's not just about the vocabulary, it's about cultural pride, history, and national flavor. The same goes for American English. Even small word choices can carry big meanings. Calling your flat a flat instead of an apartment, or spelling theater with an RE instead of ER can be a conscious way to preserve a cultural connection. Language is a personal thing, tied to family, childhood, humor, and even politics. For English learners, this can be both exciting and confusing. Should you stick with one version? Is it okay to mix both? Well, here's my honest answer. Communication matters more than perfection. As long as you're understood and respectful of regional differences, it's perfectly fine to use a mix. If you're taking a British English test like IELTS, you'll want to follow British conventions. If you're studying for the TOEFL, American standards will be more helpful. But in the real world, especially in international work environments or online communication, most people speak a hybrid form of English, and that's totally normal. Before we wrap this up, here's a fun thought. Language is alive. It breathes, it adapts, and it grows with us. New words are born every year, and old ones fade out. In fact, English today is filled with slang from TikTok, emojis from Gen Z, and tech lingo from Silicon Valley. So while we're talking about American versus British English now, who knows what English will look like in 50 years? Maybe we'll all be speaking a brand new version, global English, shaped by every accent, culture, and experience. In our final segment coming up next, we'll talk about how to choose the right version for your learning goals, how to train your ear to understand both, and even how to switch between them for fun or fluency. Stay with me.
We've talked about pronunciation, vocabulary, spelling, history, and culture. Now let's turn our focus toward you, the English learner. How do you navigate these differences in your learning journey? Should you pick one and stick to it? Should you mix them? Can you switch back and forth depending on the situation? Let's answer all of those questions and give you practical strategies to grow your confidence. First, let's address a question many learners ask. Should I learn American or British English? The answer depends on your goals.
If you're planning to move, study, or work in the United States, it makes sense to prioritize American English. That means getting familiar with the accent, spelling, vocabulary, and idioms used there. Similarly, if your future is tied to the UK or a Commonwealth country like Australia, New Zealand, or South Africa, then British English might be a better fit. It's not just about words, it's about fitting into the cultural and professional environment where you'll use your skills. But what if you don't have a specific country in mind? What if you're learning English to talk to people online, travel, or improve your job opportunities globally? In that case, my advice is learn to understand both, but use one consistently when you speak or write. For example, if you choose American English, spell color without a U, say apartment instead of flat, and use gotten instead of got. Keeping your style consistent helps avoid confusion and builds your fluency. That said, there's nothing wrong with mixing styles, especially when you're still learning. Most teachers won't correct you harshly for saying elevator in a British English class or crisps in an American class. But if you're taking an exam or writing for a professional setting, consistency becomes important. So think of one version as your home base and get familiar with the other as your second dialect. Now let's talk about listening skills. One of the best ways to train your ear is to immerse yourself in both versions. Watch American TV shows like Friends, Stranger Things, or The Office to catch everyday American expressions. Then switch to British shows like Sherlock, Peaky Blinders, or The Crown to hear British vocabulary and accents. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and audiobooks from both sides can also help. Don't just focus on understanding words, pay attention to rhythm, tone, and expressions. One cool technique is called shadowing. This means listening to a sentence and repeating it out loud immediately. Try doing this with both American and British audio. For example, mimic an American saying, "Hey, what's up, you guys?" Then try a British sentence like, "Are you keen on going out this evening?" This builds your muscle memory and helps you switch styles more naturally. Another helpful trick is to keep a vocabulary diary with 2 columns, American and British. Whenever you learn a new word or phrase that has a counterpart, write it down. For example, truck, US, equals lorry, UK. Cookie, US, equals biscuit, UK. Fall, US, equals autumn, UK. This visual comparison makes it easier to remember and use both versions correctly. Let's not forget about pronunciation. If you're serious about perfecting your accent, consider using apps or videos that let you hear and repeat native speech. Pay attention to sounds like the British t in water, which is more defined, versus the American version, which sounds like water. Try mimicking these until you feel confident switching between them. Even if you never sound 100% native, these exercises sharpen your listening and speaking skills. Lastly, remember that language is meant to connect people, not divide them. Whether you're saying soccer or football, mom or mum, your goal is to be understood and to enjoy communicating. Learning both American and British English can be a superpower, especially in our global world. It gives you access to more media, helps you understand more people, and makes you a more flexible speaker. So here's your final takeaway. Choose the version that fits your goals, train yourself to understand both, and don't be afraid to experiment. Enjoy the beauty of differences. Play with the accents, laugh at the funny words, and above all, keep speaking, keep learning, and keep having fun. Whether you're sipping tea or grabbing coffee, spelling it color or color, you're part of the global English family. That's all for today's episode of our English Learning Podcast. I'm Alex, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time for another journey into the amazing world of English.